Hello, welcome to my channel. We are going to get started on our read aloud, and we are on chapter 19. Believe it or not, boys and girls, we are on chapter 19 for Charlotte's Web. Okay, so I'm gonna turn on my light so that you can see a little bit more. So remember, for Charlotte's Web, our read aloud, we always have our handy, our paper handy, a pencil and pen handy. Because we create a T-chart, a triple T-chart, where we write an inference on a character. We have textual evidence, and we have a section, a column, another column, what makes us think about their motivation. So I'm gonna go ahead and share with you some of the juicy words in this chapter. This is actually one of my favorite chapters, so I hope that everyone is paying attention and following along. So you're going to have to take out your notebook and write some of these words down. So here are some of the words. I'm going to go ahead and make it larger so that we can all see it. And I'll move my little camera out of the way down here. Okay, so first word for chapter 19, magnum opus. Magnum opus, say it with me, magnum opus. So magnum opus means important work of art, and we're going to hear that in chapter 19, important work of art. So keep a lookout and listen for that word, that way you know what it is. Remember, good readers always go back and try to figure words out that they don't know. So see, these are some of the words that we are most likely not aware of, and we don't know what they mean. So that's why we're going over them before we read the chapter. So next word, say it with me, downhearted. Downhearted, I'm right here, downhearted. And downhearted means when someone feels discouraged or has low spirits. So you're feeling downhearted, you're feeling discouraged, you have a low spirit, low energy, you're not in the mood. Next word, say it with me, pep. Pep, when someone's pep, their energy is high, they're high-spirited, they're in a good mood. So if you're feeling peppy, you're in a good mood, okay? All right, next word, languish. Languish means pretty much what this picture shows you, exhausted, you're tired, you're super duper exhausted, right? You're feeling languish, you're feeling beat up. Next word, say it with me, carousing, carousing, carousing. So when you're carousing, you're enjoying time with others in a lively manner. You're being active, you're being carousing, you're full of happiness, and you're enjoying your time with others. You're carousing. Okay, next word, say it with me. Gorge, gorge. One more time, gorge. So when you're gorging, you're eating a large amount. You're just taking it all in. You're just being so hungry, and you're just gorging everything. You're downing everything. Hankering, hankering. Say it with me. Hankering, hankering. When we hear the word hankering, it means a strong desire to do something. I'm hankering to redesign my bedroom, or I'm hankering to learn about math. Like I have a strong desire, right? Next word, fluttered. Say it with me. Fluttered, fluttered. To fly unsteadily. So you think about a bird or anybody with wings, and they're fluttering. They're flying unsteadily. They're just going chaotic, right? Last word, content. Content. Say it with me. Content. In a state of peaceful happiness. Okay, so I pronounced it wrong. There's words that we can pronounce differently and have a different meaning. We know about those, right? So it's actually content. In this case, it's content. When you are content, say it with me, content, not content, content. In a state of peaceful happiness. I'm feeling content. I'm feeling happy. It's another way of saying happy. So this is why, sorry, I'm gonna go back. Go ahead and pause the video so you can write these words down. Hopefully you wrote them down already. Okay, so the next slide is where I'm going to have you create your triple T chart. Say it with me, triple T chart. And at the top first column, you're labeling inference about character traits. Now, if you already created this chart, then you're just adding on. If you are barely, watching these videos, don't worry, we're helping you get logged into internet and all of that, and your Google Classroom. and all of these websites. So if you're barely joining us, you should still listen to this chapter. Create the triple T chart, because we're all still learning how to make inferences based on textual evidence. We're going to go back and cite our book. And then we're going to, in the last column, it's called This Makes Me Think. So we're going to think about the character's motivation. Why is this character this way? So we're going to focus on Fern today. So I'm giving you a heads up, we're focusing on Fern. And at the end of our chapter, after listening to the chapter down here below, what would be the perfect title? After I read the chapter, what would be the perfect title? What would be the name of this title? I will title this chapter because, and don't forget, some people are forgetting, comment this below your the assignment on Google Classroom, on your teacher's Google Classroom. You are writing down this sentence. I would title this chapter because got it? And then we always write our summary. Now this is Miss Alonso's summary. It's very nice and neat. See how she wrote the words on the right, all the juicy words? She even drew an illustration. And then she has a full page, which is the summary, new retail. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing and let's jump into our chapter. I'm sorry, I was about to tell you the title. So chapter 19. Next morning, when the first light came into the sky and the sparrows stirred in the trees, when the cows rattled their chains and the rooster crowed and the early automobiles went whispering along the road, Wilbur awoke and looked for Charlotte. So remember, Charlotte is the spider that's been helping Wilbur, and Wilbur is the cute little pig that lives on the farm. And Charlotte's supposed to be helping Wilbur not escape, but survive. So what do pigs do when they live on a farm? They get slaughtered and they are sold for their bacon, their meat. That's what we do. That's the natural way to do it, is to eat pigs. But Charlotte wants to save Wilbur, and Wilbur doesn't want to die. So that's basically a summary of what this whole Charlotte's Web book is about. This is Wilbur. This is Fern, okay? And some of these other characters in the book. So Charlotte's the spider. Wilbur awoke and looked for Charlotte. He saw her up overhead in a corner near the back of his pen. She was very quiet. Her 8 legs were spread wide. She seemed to have shrunk during the night. Next to her, attached to the ceiling, Wilbur saw a curious object. Think about the object. Remember in the past chapters, we're learning about Charlotte and what spiders do. And what do spiders do? They are insects that eat other insects and suck their blood. They create spider webs to live on and catch their prey, their other insects. And they also lay egg sacs because they lay eggs. So Wilbur saw a curious object. It was a sort of a sac or a cocoon. It was peach-colored and looked as though it were made of cotton candy. So think about an egg sac, a spider's egg sac. It does look like cotton candy, right? I agree. I agree with Wilbur. It does look like cotton candy. Are you awake, Charlotte? He said softly. Yes, came the answer. What is that nifty little thing? Did you make it? I did indeed, replied Charlotte in a weak voice. Is it a plaything? Plaything? I should say not. It is my egg sac, my magnum opus. I don't know what a magnum opus is, said Wilbur. That's Latin. And here goes Charlotte with her curious object that Wilbur saw, and it is actually an egg sac. That's Latin, explained Charlotte. It means great work. This egg sac is my great work, the finest thing I've ever made. What's inside it? Asked Wilbur. Eggs? 514 of them. She replied. 514? said Wilbur. You're kidding. No, I'm not. I counted them. I got started counting, so I kept on, just to keep my mind occupied. It's a perfectly beautiful egg sac, said Wilbur, feeling as happy as though he had constructed it himself. Yes, it is pretty, replied Charlotte, patting the sack with her 2 front legs. Anyway, I can guarantee that it is strong. It's made out of the toughest material I have. It is also waterproof. The eggs are inside and will be warm and dry. Charlotte, said Wilbur dreamily, Are you really going to have 514 children? If nothing happens, yes, she said. Of course, they won't show up till next spring. Wilbur noticed that Charlotte's voice sounded sad. What makes you sound so downhearted? I should think you'd be terribly happy about this. Oh, don't pay any attention to me, said Charlotte. I just don't have much pep anymore. I guess I feel sad because I won't ever see my children. Did you know that spiders don't see their children? What do you mean you won't see your children? Of course you will. We'll all see them. It's going to be simply wonderful next spring in the barn cellar with 540 baby spiders running around all over the place. And the geese will have a new set of goslings, and the sheep will have their new lambs. Maybe, said Charlotte quietly. However, I have a feeling I'm not going to see the results of last night's efforts. I don't feel good at all. I think I'm languishing, to tell you the truth. Wilbur didn't understand the word languish, and he hated to bother Charlotte by asking her to explain. But he was so worried he thought he had to ask. What does languishing mean? It means I'm slowing up, feeling my age. I'm not young anymore, Wilbur, but I don't want you to worry about me. This is your big day today. Look at my web. Doesn't it show up well with the new dew on it? Charlotte's web never looked more beautiful than it looked this morning. Each strand held dozens of bright drops of early morning dew. The light from the east struck it and made it all plain and clear. It was perfect. It was a perfect piece of designing and building. In another hour or two, a steady stream of people would pass by, admiring it and reading it and looking at Wilbur and marveling at the miracle. As Wilbur was studying the web, a pair of whiskers and a sharp face appeared. Slowly, Templeton, this is Templeton the rat, dragged himself across the pen and threw himself down in the corner. I'm back, he said in a husky voice. What a night! The rat was swollen twice his normal size. His stomach was as big around as a jelly jar. What a night, he repeated hoarsely. What feasting and carousing. A real gorge. I must have eaten the remains of 30 lunches. Never have I seen such leavings, and everything well ripened and seasoned with the passage of time and the heat of the day. Oh, it was rich, my friends, rich. So remember, they had a county fair, they had a fair, and Wilbur's here for a competition. So Templeton came and Charlotte came. Charlotte came to help create the fantastic, terrific, all those words above his crate so that people can come see all the wonderful words that Charlotte's creating with her web. And then Templeton's just here to support things flying. So anyways, Templeton's a rat. So he went to go gorge and carouse around the fair where there's a bunch of scraps and food on the floor. So he came back super full. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Charlotte in disgust. It would serve you right if you had an acute attack of indigestion. Don't worry about my stomach, snarled Templeton. It can handle anything. And by the way, I've got some bad news. As I came past that pig next door, the one that calls himself Uncle, remember, Wilbur's in a competition, so there's a big pig next to him. And he's called Uncle. I noticed a blue tag on the front of his pen. That means he won first prize. I guess you're licked, Wilbur. You might as well relax. Nobody's going to hang any medal on you. Furthermore, I wouldn't be surprised if Zuckerman changes his mind about you. Zuckerman is his owner. Zuckerman is a farmer. Wait till he gets hankering for some fresh pork and smoked ham and crisp bacon. He'll take the knife to you, my boy. Be still, Templeton, said Charlotte. You're too stuffed and bloated to know what you're saying. Don't pay any attention to him, Wilbur. Wilbur tried not to think about what the rat had just said. He decided to change the subject. Templeton, said Wilbur, if you weren't so dopey, you would have noticed that Charlotte made an egg sac. She is going to become a mother. For your information, There are 514 eggs in that peachy little sack. Is this true? Asked the rat, eyeing the sack suspiciously. Yes, it is. It's true, sighed Charlotte. Congratulations, murmured Templeton. This has been a night. He closed his eyes, pulled some straw over himself, and dropped off into a deep sleep. Wilbur and Charlotte were glad to be rid of him for a while. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Arable's truck rolled into the fairgrounds and came to a stop at Wilbur's pen. Everybody climbed out. Look, cried Fern, look at Charlotte's web. Look what it says. The grown-ups and the children joined hands and stood there studying the new sign. The sign, the spider web that Charlotte created above Wilbur's crate, it reads, humble. Humble, said Mr. Zuckerman. Now, isn't that just the word for Wilbur? Everyone rejoiced to find that the miracle of the web had been repeated. Wilbur gazed up lovingly into their faces. He looked very humble and very grateful. Fern winked at Charlotte. Lurvy soon got busy. He poured a bucket of warm slops into the trough, and while Wilbur ate his breakfast, Lurvy scratched him gently with a smooth stick. Wait a minute, cried Avery. Look at this. He pointed to the blue tag on Uncle's pen. This pig has won first prize already. The Zuckermans and the Arabelle stared at the tag. Mrs. Zuckerman began to cry. Nobody said a word. They just stared at the tag. Then they stared at Uncle. Then they stared at the tag again. Lurvy took out an enormous handkerchief and blew his nose very loud. So loud, in fact, that the noise was heard by stable boys at the horse barn. Can I have some money? Asked Fern. I want to go out on the midway. You stay right where you are, said her mother. Tears came to Fern's eyes. Remember, Fern is the little girl. You stay right here where you are, said her mother. Tears came down Fern's eyes. What's everybody crying about? Asked Mr. Zuckerman. Let's get busy, Edith. Bring the buttermilk. Mrs. Zuckerman wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. She went to the truck and came back with a gallon jar of buttermilk. Bath time, said Zuckerman cheerfully, and Mrs. Zuckerman and Avery climbed into Wilbur's pen. Avery slowly poured buttermilk on Wilbur's head and back, and as it trickled down his sides and cheeks, Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman rubbed it into his ear and skin. Passers-by stopped to watch. Pretty soon quite a crowd gathered around Wilbur. Wilbur grew beautifully white and smooth, so they're prepping him for the day that judges are going to choose who the winner is. The morning sun shone through his pink ears. He isn't as big as the pig next door, remarked one bystander, but he's cleaner. That's what I like. So do I, said another man. He's humble too. Humble means you're very kind and you're not conceited. You're very nice and thoughtful and generous, and you're not mean. So humble means that no matter what the situation is, you remain calm, collected, kind. Everybody who visited the pig pen had a good word to say about Wilbur. Everyone admired the web, and of course nobody noticed Charlotte. Suddenly a voice was heard on the loudspeaker. Attention, please, it said. Will Mr. Homer Zuckerman bring his famous pig to the judge's booth in front of the grandstand? A special award will be made there in 20 minutes. Everyone is invited to attend. Crate your pig, please, Mr. Zuckerman, and report to the judge's booth promptly. For a moment after this announcement, the Arabelles and the Zuckermans were unable to speak or move. Then Avery picked up a handful of straw and threw it high in the air and gave it a loud yell. The straw fluttered down like confetti into Fern's hair. Mrs. Zuckerman hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Mr. Zuckerman hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Mr. Arabelle kissed Mrs. Arabelle. Avery kissed Wilbur. Lurvy shook hands with everybody. Fern hugged her mother. Avery hugged Fern. Mrs. Arabelle hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Up overhead, in the shadows of the ceiling, Charlotte crouched unseen. Here's the image. Everyone's gathering around to see what the announcement is for Wilbur. Charlotte's front legs circled front legs encircling her egg sac. Her heart was not beating as strongly as usual, and she felt weary and old, but she was sure at last that she had saved Wilbur's life, and she felt peaceful and content. "We have no other time to lose," shouted Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy helped with the crate. "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "You wait," said Mrs. Arable. "Can't you see everybody is busy?" Put that empty buttermilk jar into the truck," commanded Mr. Arable. Avery grabbed the jar and rushed to the truck. "Does my hair look all right?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman. "Looks fine," snapped Mr. Zuckerman as he and Lurvy set the crate down in front of Wilbur. "You didn't even look at my hair," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "You're all right, Edith," said Mrs. Arable. "Just keep calm." Templeton, remember Templeton's the rat, asleep in the straw, heard the commotion and awoke. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but when he saw that men shoving Wilbur into the crate, he made up his mind to go along. He watched his chance, and when no one was looking, he, Templeton, crept into the crate and buried himself in the straw at the bottom. Okay, this is the end of the chapter, so pay attention. "All ready, boys," cried Mr. Zuckerman. "Let's go." He and Mr. Arable and Lurvy and Avery grabbed the crate and boosted it over the side of the pen and up into the truck. Fern jumped aboard and sat on top of the crate. She still had straw in her hair and looked very pretty and excited. Mr. Arable started the motor. Everybody climbed in and off they drove to the judge's booth in front of the grandstand. As they passed the Ferris wheel, Fern gazed up at it and wished she were in the topmost car with Henry Fussy at her side. So I'm going to repeat that last part. As they passed the Ferris wheel, Fern gazed up at it and wished she were in the topmost car with Henry Fussy at her side. And that is the end of chapter 19. All right, friends, so that was the end of chapter 19. So let's go ahead and get started on our triple T chart. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and here we are. Now, I know we said we were going to make an inference on Fern. I can say something about Fern, but because towards the end she's kind of not really focused on the main event, what's going on, which is that Wilbur is going to be recognized and awarded. But let's focus on what I had in mind. Let's focus on Wilbur. So I'm going to put Wilbur here. Okay, so inference about a character. So Wilbur is maturing in many ways. He is learning, or has learned, he is learning how to remain confident and secure about himself. Remember when Templeton came back after a long night of gorging and carousing the night fairgrounds? So he came back kind of rude and mean to Wilbur, saying that he's not going to win, that Uncle Pig is the winner, and that Mr. Zuckerman might change his mind and end up still killing Wilbur for his meat, right? When Mr. Zuckerman gets hungry and all of that. So I'm gonna focus on Wilbur and how he has developed maturity throughout the chapter book. Because in the beginning, oh my gosh, remember, he was crying nonstop. He didn't want to die. So he asked for help, and then he met Charlotte. Charlotte is a spider that's been helping him. So I'm going to focus on Wilbur. Wilbur is maturing in many ways. He is learning how to remain confident and secure about himself. I infer Wilbur is growing up to become the adult pig version of himself. Adult. And so I'm going to go ahead and read that. Wilbur is maturing in many ways. He is learning how to remain confident and secure about himself. I infer, because we're making an inference, Wilbur is growing up to become the adult pig version of himself and accepting the life cycle of a pig, right? So textual evidence. I'm gonna go back to the part where I was explaining that Templeton kind of came back really rude and was just telling Wilbur that he might end up being meat for the Zuckerman family. So I'm gonna go ahead and find that part. Remember this part in the story? So it's on page 148. He says, what a night, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and put, don't worry. Okay, so he says, Templeton, Templeton came back from a long night of gorging. Remember, we want to use these new words, these new juicy words. Templeton came back from a long night of gorging and was sharing, quotation marks, bad news that Wilbur isn't a winner and will possibly be considered dinner for the Zuckerman's family. Wilbur remained positive like Charlotte has taught him. In the text, we always want to make sure we have textual evidence to support our thinking. In the text on page 148, it states, and then you want to put quotation marks, they're not your words. It states, Wilbur tried not to think about what the rat had just said. I'm gonna go ahead and make this smaller so that we can write more. Rat had just said, he decided to change the subject, period. And that's the part where Wilbur goes on to change the subject, and he talks about Charlotte and her awesome looking egg sac and how he knows all these fun facts about spiders now, especially Charlotte, how she's gonna have 500. And he goes on to say, Templeton, said Wilbur, if you weren't so dopey, you would have noticed that Charlotte has made an egg sac. She is going to become a mother. For your information, there are 514 eggs in the peachy little sac. So therefore, that textual evidence would justify my thinking that I infer Wilbur is growing up to become the adult version pig of himself. He knows one day he's going to die. He knows one day he's going to be somebody's meal, right? But in the moment, he wants to focus on positivity and focus on Charlotte's accomplishment, right? Her biggest accomplishment, and not be a crybaby, not cry and wheel and be all sad. He's at a fairgrounds. He's going to compete against another pig, even if he loses, right? He is appreciating and acknowledging Templeton being there to support him, even though he's kind of being mean, and he's wants to support Charlotte in her accomplishment. So I'm gonna go ahead and end that part there. Now the motivation. So Wilbur's maturity, I wanna go back to my inference. Wilbur's maturity is much more noticeable thanks to Charlotte Charlotte's friendship and Charlotte's, there you go, there's an extra go there. Okay. Thanks to Charlotte's friendship, Wilbur knows that he will eventually be all right. He must learn how to face reality. Okay, and after listening to the chapter, so let's go ahead and read what we have here. So inference about character traits, read it with me, okay? I know I can't see you, and I know you're probably in a noisy area or whatever the case is, but just read it along. Inference about character traits. Wilbur is maturing in many ways. He is learning how to remain confident and secure about himself. I infer Wilbur is growing up to become the adult big version of himself. Textual evidence. Templeton came back from a long night of gorging and was sharing bad news that Wilbur isn't a winner and will possibly be considered dinner for the Zuckerman's family. Wilbur remained positive like Charlotte has taught him. In the text on page 148, it states, Wilbur tried not to think about what the rat had just said. He decided to change the subject. Okay, and the motivation behind that. Wilbur's maturity is much more noticeable thanks to Charlotte's friendship. Wilbur knows that he will eventually be all right. He must learn how to face reality. Now your job is to write a summary about and retell the chapter 19. After listening to the chapter, what would be the perfect title? So below, make sure you complete the sentence either in the comments or text it to me, write it to me or your teacher. I would title this chapter because what would you give this title? Okay. All right, friends. So we are done for today. I will see you later. Have a great rest of your day. See you later.